in the Lincoln Design Studio. And we're going to kind of rewind a little bit and take you through what we've curated in terms of how Lincoln Design has moved through the past 100 years. So, you know, Ted did a great job of explaining how Edsel was an artistic inspiration for the brand. And, you know, in the 1920s, a lot of automotive companies hired, you know, the top illustrators to illustrate their cars for their advertising. And I think what you're seeing here is you're seeing that Lincoln was and still is a brand about celebration, a brand about occasion, a brand about togetherness with others. And the journey is as much as the reward is the destination. We call that the romance of travel. That's something that you're going to hear about more as we go through the years in this journey. And I think that you can see here that you know, Lincoln doesn't shout in these ads, right? We exude confidence through restrained elegance. And what's really nice about these is, you know, you're seeing all of these different examples of travel. You know, when we think about flight, we think about aviation. Certainly an inspiration for us, but sometimes mechanical aviation can be loud or overbearing. So I want to take you over to some more artwork that's here. Now again, with Edsel's interest in art, he commissioned the artist Stark Davis to create these beautiful paintings. Here are two originals that Ted and Leslie got from us from the collection. And we use those in the advertising. And so when we're looking at flight here, it's all about, you know, graceful, elegance, and alive and quiet. What's beautiful about these ads is the color of the birds were coordinated with the color of the vehicles. And so just a really beautiful, you know, it's not just showing the car, but it's showing the experience that we want you to have within the car. Now, one thing I do want to mention as we go through this, so we rewound you back to the 20s. I want to make sure that I emphasize that if we as designers now, like the designers that came before us, we're not just always looking at the past. We're not looking for elements to resurrect or recreate. But like the designer's work that you're going to see here, we're always looking forward towards the future. And Lincoln does its best and it charts its own path, not chasing someone else's. So I'm going to start you with the 1930s over here, and we're going to talk about the Zephyr. So this, I think you saw when you first came in. I love this car. You know, Edsel was also very interested in aerodynamics, and he commissioned the Briggs Company to start doing some studies. They worked with a designer slash aerodynamicist slash engineer, John Giarda, and they created a number of different prototypes that became what was the 36 Zephyr. It's very beautiful, but form follows function, just like the beauty that you saw in the artwork with the birds. It's also very innovative. It was the first American car, one of the first American cars with unibody construction versus body on frame. So you can see that again, it's another point in our journey where we're innovating and moving toward the future. Now, obviously, we all looked at the Continental, so you can see contrasting what you see on the left with what you see on the right. This is where everything starts to get even more elegant, right? Even a little bit more exuberant, but not shouting out over the top. So lowering everything down, you're starting to see this focus on the horizontal, which we'll talk about as we get into the other sketches. So this, I believe, with Edsel's influences, is really what started us on that path towards elegance, exuberance, and horizontality. So let's go over to the 1940s. I'm going to snake over this way.
Real quick, what are we looking at? These are sort of working sketches, working drawings from the design studio at the time? Or?
Yes, we have a number of different, some of them are original sketches, some are ones that were done, you know, sort of after the fact, and some of them are originals that we got from the collection. So this one, I believe.
But these were done on like a Wednesday. Like it wasn't.
What's that?
These were done like in the normal course of
the normal course,
process,
yeah.
right?
And most of all of these over here were the same.
Got it. Cool.
So I'm going to go over here in between the two 1940s panels. So in the 1940s, let me make sure I get everything that we want to talk about here. I love all of these sketches, but this one I always gravitate towards. So you can again see this emphasis on the horizontal. You can see the integration of the fenders. You can see the bright work that bisects the fuselage, and really what you'll see in this sketch that you'll see in a lot of other ones in the future is this nose up, tail down attitude. We call this the in-flight gesture. And just like the horizon line, it's never actually really straight. There's always a slight bend. So you're always seeing a slight arc to everything. And this lets your eye continue, and it creates the sense of movement even when it's standing still. So you can start to see this happen in the 1940s as everything got a little bit more elongated. Now, let's go over to the 50s. Go on this one. Okay. So, aviation started in the 40s, really became an influence in the 50s. You probably all well know how the jet age and tail fins and spears and all kinds of decor really brought a lot of noise to car design. Lincoln took a different path. We, again, really wanted to emphasize restrained elegance. So even when you see the decor, right, it's simple and it has a purpose. If you look at this red sketch, this bright work, bisects the fuselage again and really takes your eye towards the length versus the height of the vehicle. And you can see a lot of influences. You saw the XP100 that Ted took you through out there. You have a very similar front end design. This influenced the Capri. So all of these things that were being explored and done in the studio, these are actual sketches, as you inquired before. They made it actually into the cars. These weren't just dreams. These were innovations that made it to production. So now let's go over here to this panel. So Ted talked to you about the Mark II, one of my favorite cars as well. Again, it was so important to elevate the Continental name. They had that design competition, and it really was an exercise in trying to find out how much you can do with as little as possible. There's nothing on this car that doesn't really need to be there. Even the idea of exposing the rear spare, it's adding length to the car. It's adding visual length to the car. It's not just there for decoration. And I think you'll see in all of these, and when you go back and look at some of the S negatives, the styling negatives, you're going to see all these different proposals that were done. They were all trying to find that right balance. So now we're going to swing around the corner. I've taken you through a lot of the exterior. I want to stop for a second and talk about the interior. It's actually really good we have this panel behind us too. So, obviously the exterior is where the image of the vehicle is projected, but the interior is where you experience it. So, how do we architect all these different details? So, yeah, you need a gauge cluster, but this is a gauge cluster you want to look at, not that you have to. You need a steering wheel, the steering wheel you want to touch, not because you have to. And all of these beautiful, discrete details were punctuated in an interior architecture. If you look at the sketch on the left, again, further emphasizes that horizontal. This is one of the proposals from the design studio for the Continental of the 60s. So if you look at all of those, you're always going to see this strong horizontal emphasis. It creates a sense of spaciousness, it creates a sense of balance and equilibrium. Okay, so since we went from 50s to 60s, now we're going to go to 60s again. So I'm going to stand here in the middle, and then we got two panels here, and I want to talk about these for a second. So obviously, the 60s were defined by the Continental that we saw before. The question was, where do we go from there? And you're going to see a further exploration with horizontality, with simple minimalism, right? It's very hard to do something simple. It's really easy to add a lot of noise. But the thing I want to mention in these sketches was, we talk about the interior space and how we want people to feel. And that's why I was kind of, looking at those sketches there, those pictures that were on the wall, right? So how do we take and architect that interior space, and what does that mean for what we have to do with the structure and the exterior? So I love this one, because this one sort of reminds me of some of the rear windows that you would have seen on our 58 to 60 Mark IVs. But again, how do we increase the glass, right? How do we do the body work over it? And you look at this one over here, this sort of wraparound rear window, what we would have to do with the roof structure. And again, this is a little bit over exaggerated as a sketch, but it really, again, everything's all about that horizontal, all about the elegance and just enough exuberance without it being too much over the top. This one's really cool too because it, this is a sketch of what one of the limos, the presidential limos, could look like. And this one's really cool because it doesn't actually have a passenger side to the front, right? It's really only the chauffeur, and what's prioritized is the second row. And you're going to hear more. You're going to hear us talk more about that both today and as we go throughout the year. But I just love this. I love this sketch because I had actually not had seen one of these sketches for the limos before, but it's really cool. Okay, so now let's go to the 70s. Do it around. I love the 70s of them. You saw that Continental, or sorry, the Cartier Mark V, that 79 that was out there. So again, I think this is the decade where we hit that peak of exuberance, right? If we'd done a little bit more, it might have been too much. The form language got very chiseled. The forms got really elongated. You saw, again, some of these, heritage, features coming back into the design with the Continental kit and the opera windows. But really, this is where the town car came in. This is where a lot of iconic Lincolns were created during this period. And actually, this one here was done by Fritz Mayhew, who was I met him when I was an aspiring young design student when he was in charge of Ford Design. This one here was done by Ray Beamer, who was the father of another chief designer whom I got to work with, Daryl Beamer, who recently retired in the last couple of years. So there's a lot of history in all of this work. It's really cool. Oh, one more thing I almost forgot to mention. So this is where the designer series that Ted mentioned came into play. So there's a friend of mine and colleague, current colleague as well, who bought a 79 Mark V. It was a Bill Glass one, so it had like the dark navy blue with the white top, and really emphasized the horizontal with that two-tone color scheme. And I can tell you from riding in that car, you get in there and you feel like you're on top of the world. You're going like 20 miles an hour, right? But you just the feeling that you have in that thing is just absolutely amazing. All right, so we're gonna swing around here, try and fast forward a little bit to the 80s and 90s. All right. So you can see this was started coming out of the 70s. This sketch, we picked this one because this one still has that nose up, tail down, in-flight gesture. You can see that this is really influential to what the 82 Continental looked like. But the form started to go from more chiseled to more aero inspired as we went throughout the decade. Now this sketch over here to the right was done by a designer, chief designer, Doug Gafka, who was actually the first chief designer I ever worked for. He was a great mentor to me. And I think you can see that even though the form language is quite different, the principles are still the same, right? It's again emphasizing the horizontal, trying to get as much of that tail down gesture that we could. It arcs down towards the back, even though the front is low. The other important thing here was the lighting. So we always talk about horizontal again. You guys are probably tired of hearing me say it, but it's really, really important. We were able to, through Lincoln's push, to get flush headlamps replacing the old steel beam that everybody would use. We were able to make the lighting part of this horizontal feature. We were able to advance front-end car design. So it was in '84, the Mark VII came out. It was the first vehicle in the US to have those flush headlamps, and it just changed front-end car design from that point forward. So another really innovative point in Lincoln's timeline. So we're going to snake over here. We'll just this way. And we'll talk about the Mark. So we mentioned the Mark VII. We'll talk about the Mark VII and Mark VIII now. I remember the first time I saw a Mark VIII, and I was in college, and it was parked in Ann Arbor, and it was, I hadn't seen one before. It was on the street, and I just was like, what is that? The proportion, the elegance, how low it looked. I mean, just all those principles we talked about still were in play. Now, The same guy who bought that Mark V Bill Blast, my friend Jim Smithbar, also penned one of the winning sketches for the Mark VIII. You can see all the little dots. We used to, they'd all be up in the studio, right? And we all, everybody would get dots, or the chiefs and the directors would get dots. And of course, you try and find where the dots were, because you could stick an extra dot like on yours. But this was, I've done. This, exactly. So this one, yeah, it's a little bit more voluptuous. But if you look at this and you look at the Continental that Etzel's Continental that's behind us, you can see that, again, all those same principles apply. So again, form languages change, but the principles stay the same. And that's a good segue to this guy over here, which was one of the key sketches for the '96 Lincoln Sentinel show car. So you see this volley back and forth between a chiseled form language and a more aero or voluptuous form language. And this was done by a team headed up by Rick Wells, who's another chief designer I got the pleasure to work with when I was a much younger designer. So, okay, now we're gonna move over to the current exterior. So you might recognize some of these sketches from when we introduced the Corsair and Aviator. These two sketches were actually done by our current global design director of Lincoln, Kamal Kirk. And what's really great about these is the way that we've been able to take all the principles that we talked about and apply them to what we call a 2-box. So you probably heard us designers talk about 3-box, 2-box. And you might say, okay, well, all this stuff you show me, how do you guys have SUVs? How does this all apply? If you think about it, the 3-box is simply, a hood, passenger compartment, trunk. 2-box was kind of like the original Zephyr and some of the original Lincolns. So how do we apply all those principles to a 2-box shape? This S-curve that you see here is a great, innovative way, without extra decor, without extra crease lines, to shape the body, inspired by the human form, to really slice the visual height and bring emphasis to the overall length. And it does so in just a beautiful, voluptuous way, but still and you can see it in this sketch over here, it's anchored by the emphasis on the horizontal, tail down, nose up, in-flight gesture. So all of these same principles still apply. All right? So now I'm gonna have you kind of swing around where Chrissy is. I'm gonna go this way. Let's talk about interior design again for one more time. So you might be familiar with these. These were done by my team as we worked on the Corsair and the Aviator. And I think, again, looking at these, just scanning across them, you'll see again this strong emphasis on horizontality. Right? The instrument panel is a study in horizontal layers, and getting that just right is what gives you that sense of balance, equilibrium, and spaciousness. We really want to design the overall space to create that sense of relaxed command. We do that by putting the people in the right place and constructing what we call the walls around them the right way, and the furniture around them in the right way. So just like you're sitting out and you're looking at sky, sea, and sand, right? We're trying to give you these same horizontal layers to relax you and make you feel like you're looking at a wide panorama. Then it wraps around you as if it was wind coming off of the ailerons of a wing. So again, same principles on the exterior, we apply on the interior. Okay? So now I'm going to take you to a little glimpse to the future. Okay. All right, so let's start over here. Some of you may have seen this, I'm sure you have. This was a project that we did with Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, one of the top design schools in the country. They worked in collaboration with our design team at our California Lincoln Design Hub in Irvine. And I think what you'll notice here is, again, all those same principles, but done in a new way. That's how robust and strong our Lincoln DNA is. So even the students who don't work with us day in and day out, we're able to pick up on these principles and create something along with our participation that really starts to see where we could take Lincoln next. And what's really cool about this, I mean, obviously the proportion is great, position of the greenhouse, the wheels, and the elongation, and you know, restrained exuberance is just enough. But again, the way that we've emphasized this horizontal with this color break coming off of the headlamps and wrapping around the car, you almost don't know where the body is and where the glass is, and it's a whole new way to look at the graphic and further take something that already really was exceptionally low and make it look even lower, make it look even more elegant. And you'll see, again, just like when you're looking at the horizon, it's never straight, there's always a bend. It's just a slight little arc to that line as it goes through. Okay, now let's talk about the interior. So these sketches are all great examples, again, of how we build the car from the inside out, how we try to create an experience for the customer on the inside of the vehicle and construct the space around them. What I love about these two on the left that were done by a designer on my team, you know, you think about interior sketches and, you know, you'll see instrument panels, you know, a lot. Well, we sketched the roof. So what we're trying to do, just like those sketches we saw in the 60s, is what do we do with the canopy? What do we do with the glass? How do we construct the room the right way? And, you know, we're really asking the question here, what does Lincoln Sanctuary mean as we move towards our electrified future? Right? We're really looking at the enablers of what an electrified platform can do. It gives us a lot more space to work with in the interior, and you'll hear more about that very soon. Okay, so I think let me just scan through here because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So from a design standpoint, you know, what makes a Lincoln a Lincoln? You know, the proportions may change, the form language may change, the package may change, but it's always about the right amount of exuberance, the feeling of flight, the sense of occasion and celebration, the romance of travel, which you'll hear more about that, the invitation for others to join you on your journey, and that's what we're taking forward with us as we begin our next 100 years of Lincoln. So with that, I'm gonna hand it back over to Ted, and he can tell you what happens next.
Perfect. Well,